Hello and welcome to this edition of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. I am your host for tonight, Gary Cocker, and I am joined by a man who has experienced his team win in the Premiership this season. It's Graeme Thewliss.
Hello. Hi, Gary. How are you?
Not bad now. We're really sorry that you're having to put up with us two today. I believe it was supposed to be Joe Sked, Robert Borthwick, Craig Fowler and Craig Cairns today, but they all fell sick to loseritis over the weekend. So we have picked up the slack here and said, as usual, given it is a Monday show, we will be going through the weekend action in all 6 of the Scottish Premiership games, batting around the country to make very much vibes-based predictions and analysis on each of the 12 teams in sort of excitement order. And in that case, given I've got you here, Graeme, we might as well go to, I don't even know if you would call it the shock result of the weekend, but certainly the funniest one, as Motherwell ran out 3-1 victors over Heart of Midlothian Football Club. Motherwell went into a fairly easy 2-0 lead before Oda pulled one back for the visitors, and then Motherwell decided just to add a little bit of gloss on it at the end, courtesy of a lovely gift-wrapped hospital pass for header from Kai Rolls. I don't know where you want to start with this, Graeme. Really, the floor is yours, because what a result.
It was a good laugh, more than anything else. I am struggling to think of a time where I had it's been the best part of 18 months or so, I reckon, since the last time I enjoyed a Motherwell game quite as much as I did enjoy this. With the exception of around about, I would say, a 10-minute period in between Motherwell making it 2-0, and then I would say probably Barry Mackay coming on 70 minutes. Motherwell harassed the shit out of Hearts from the opening whistle, did exactly everything correct, looked at it on the basis of, like, Hearts are back from pills in midweek. What are we going to do? We're going to make their day absolutely fucking miserable from the opening whistle, and just absolutely hounded them all over the park. It was, it's one of those lovely performances when there's not a single failure within the side. It was by a distance, by a significant distance, the best performance we've had out of Andy Halliday. We saw a little bit more from Mazwanize, our Zimbabwean internationalist. Oxborough had almost nothing to do. Casey should have scored earlier to put Motherwell more gloss to it. Liam Gordon remains an absolute colossus for Motherwell, and there's going to be a lot of, as you'll have seen, Gary, in the Terrace group chat and over the past few days, as a lot of references to how bad Hearts were. And believe me, we will come to that, because they were absolutely atrocious over the 90 minutes. But Motherwell were absolutely terrific throughout the entirety of the game. As I say, with the exception of that sort of 10-minute spell where they rocked a little bit. The pressing from all over the park was aggressive. It was about 10 minutes into the game. They were looking at it going, Motherwell are going to have to be incredibly fit to keep this up for the entire duration of the 90 minutes. And in the end, couldn't quite do that. And that sort of 10-minute spell kind of was Motherwell sort of struggling a little bit. The two changes in terms of Seddon and Sparrow coming on did improve things there as well, and Watt being added earlier on in the second half as well. Throughout the throughout the Premier Sports Cup,
it'll always be the Betfred, but yes, I know what you mean.
It'll always be the Betfred. Yeah. Throughout those games, Motherwell looked absolutely deadly from set pieces. It felt like something that we very much worked on, and when you have Dan Casey, Liam Gordon, as part of your back five as well within that as well, and then obviously you've got strikers like Robinson in there as well, and Wilson, who'll just throw himself at things too, and just there's a lot of height within that team as well. We looked very, very dangerous from set pieces. Unfortunately, then we seemed to forget how to do that in the opening couple of games of the season, and just kind of forgot that was an avenue for us to do anything with. That's come back with a vengeance in this game. 2 assists from Lennon Miller, assisted enormously by quite how catastrophic Hearts' defending was on both of them.
I could not believe. I mean, this game to me, it had so many echoes of what happened in their previous run out at Dens Park, which is where, as you say, it's difficult because Hearts were a disaster, but it's also, they were a disaster in part because the home team took advantage of them being a disaster. But as well as that, it just looked like, with the set pieces, they were obviously well delivered and well taken free kicks, but at the same time, it wasn't clear to me, which Hearts defender was picking up which Motherwell
Either goal scorer.
Yeah, nobody. They just didn't have a clue what they were doing, and then even then the headers,
McGinn had. I genuinely assumed that it was going to be called back via VAR for McGinn's header, because he was just in such a colossal amount of space that he had time to not only make the run, get into the space for a guy who's in the latter stages of his top flight career, but the guy to find himself in that much space at the back post unmarked to then know that past Craig Gordon was startling. As I say, I genuinely thought it was going to be called back for offside, because it seemed inconceivable that someone would have that much space. And then you saw quite what had happened, which was that Jerry Taylor was playing on everybody by about 5 yards quite comfortably as well, who then played everyone on, then tried to come out, leaving everyone with tons of space. It was terrible, absolutely terrible.
And I think what's quite interesting for me as well, just looking at Motherwell, is that I think both Motherwell and Hearts have picked up a couple of players from other Premiership teams, but it's very early in the season. Hearts have Europe distracting them. I mean, this week they didn't have any excuse against Dundee, but the players that Hearts picked up, they were lauded for, that's a brilliant pickup. You're taking, Jan Danda from Ross County, you're taking Blair Spittle from Motherwell, you're even taking James Penrith from Partick Thistle. You're taking players from, the best players at other teams, whereas Motherwell have picked up players who were maybe all right at other players, like Zach Robinson was all right at Dundee, but I wasn't convinced he would be able to cut it at Premiership level. Everyone knows what's happening with Tony Watt as well. Andy Halliday, who albeit was on loan at Motherwell last season, has only just arrived on a permanent basis from Hearts, but it seems to have worked a little bit better. And I know that Kettlewell signed tons of players, but
I think in particular the best example is Liam Gordon within that there as well. And I think it's been very clear that Liam Gordon needed a fresh start at a club. Quite where that was, it didn't particularly matter. Again, speaking to Saints fans last year, they had essentially quite a lot of sympathy for Gordon. He was being asked to do things which he wasn't necessarily particularly great at, on top of the fact that he is the captain of his own team. He is from Perth. He is a St Johnstone fan. And of all the players within the team that were going to be hurting at how bad they were and how stinking they were last year, he will be at the heart of that as well. And I think ultimately it was a real kind of sink or swim for Gordon at this point as well. He has shown in the past that he is a very capable Premiership centre half. Fine. He was at his best with McCart and Kerr either side of him at St Johnstone, and that back three had a real balance. I would say the back three that we have is not as good as that, and that's simply because I thought it was an absolutely sterling back three. But it has that same sort of level of balance. It allows Dan Casey to do the stupid things that he likes to do. And I say stupid in the kindest way, like why your centre half is barreling out of defence in the way that he does is always quite jarring to me. But he's good at it. That's what he is being asked to do. At some point, Dan Casey's going to score a Puskás nominated goal, because he does things which centre half should not do.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of times this season already stepped out and found himself about 40 yards from goal and had a shot which actually sounds terrible, but actually isn't. Like it's coming off a lot closer than you would really anticipate. And Paul McGinn, basically whatever role you ask him to do in a defence, whether it's within the centre half or as a right wing back or right back, he will do it to a 7 out of 10 performance. A note as well for Stephen O'Donnell in this game as well, who was absolutely sensational. I would implore everyone to go to whoscored.com and bring up the match report from Motherwell 3, Hearts 1, and just bring up Stephen O'Donnell's heat map from the game, because it's everywhere. If I were to make a guess as to what's happened here, the only way I could really explain it is that I believe Stephen O'Donnell has been blood doping. To be very clear, I'm not actually suggesting Stephen O'Donnell has been blood doping, but the effort, the amount of running that Stephen O'Donnell put in on Sunday afternoon at Firth Park was an inconceivable amount of distance covered. I would love to know what his training brass stats are with the GPS tracker on the back, because I would love to know compared to the rest of the team, compared to anyone else in the rest of Scotland over the course of the weekend, how that compares to anybody else's ground covered, because he was everywhere. He was up on top of Andres Salazar, who, again, Gerard Taylor had a bad game. Andres Salazar on his debut for Hearts had a horrible game as well. He will not be the first nor the last, or he's certainly not the first, and he'll certainly not be the last talented player to have a horrible afternoon in front of these stand at Motherwell. You've seen what I suspect are significantly better players than him, and guys like Calvin Ramsey and stuff just keel over. Just absolutely gets in their head. And Salazar, he never really settled, particularly at the start of the second half. Stephen O'Donnell just running up and cementing him for no particular reason about 60 seconds into the second half, just to really lay home the point that I'm going to fight you all afternoon. It's going to be a miserable day for you. And he had a miserable day, which was ultimately, he should have been hooked long before then. It was a poor decision to leave him on, because he was clearly spent. He's a guy that's not played football in 3 months and has been immediately thrown into what is a challenging game at Fir Park. And to have O'Donnell continue to hound him right up until the end of the game. And that's ultimately the back pass which Thomas Sparrow ran onto and lashed past Craig Gordon as well. He needed some time away from standing where he was.
I mean, let's pick up on Hearts as well, because we should not gloss over yet another terrible performance from them. How much do you think this is just Hearts doing what they did last season, which is an incredibly slow start because there's the distraction of Europe, quite a lot of new players bedding in, and how much of it is something that might actually be much more lingering?
It very much depends on Lawrence Shankland, I think, in that Hearts need to sign another centre forward. I'd genuinely forgotten that Liam Boyce was a Hearts player until he came on. He, even in the short period he was on the field, looked like this was a level above him now. The game was just too quick for him. Ultimately, it looked like things were happening around him at a pace. Liam Boyce has been a very fine player in Scotland, has been a very fine player for Hearts, but it looks like it's just a bit too much for him. Vargas offers something, but again, I'm not sure he's going to be the consistent goal threat that you want him to be. He did improve Hearts quite dramatically. He was one of the few bright spots. Oda offered a little bit down the right-hand side. He just got the ball down and charged at Motherwell's, whether it was a centre-back or wing-back at the time, depending who was standing at that particular moment. He offered a little bit. If Shankland is unable to replicate close to the form they had last year, I think Hearts will struggle. They do need another centre forward in, and they do need to hit the ground running. I take your point in terms of there are a lot of bodies there, they are finding their way around. But similarly, with the exception of what Taylor and Salazar, Boateng played here last year, Danda played here last year, Spittle played here last year. They know what is expected by a game at Fir Park. They know what's expected from Hearts players. They know what to anticipate from games like this. They know what they're going to have to do. They've known fine well that they're going to be playing Thursday, Sunday a lot this season. As I said with Tony in the podcast midweek as well, they talk about that as well. Like it is a challenge to do that, and you do need to kind of work your way into doing that and figure out how to do that. But ultimately, it was just a badly organised Hearts team, I think, for me. Like, they improved in the second half with the changes they made. The first half, they barely had a kick of the ball. They couldn't get anywhere near it. They did improve, as I say, in the second half when they moved to 4 at the back and improved kind of with that. But even in doing that, you end up with daft things like Stephen Kingsley playing it right back. And again, Stephen Kingsley is a very capable player, can do an awful lot of very good things. And I think played fine in Pilsen at right back there as well. But he's not a right back. He's kind of fundamentally with that there as well. So you are in some way limiting. There's a lot of square pegs and round holes at Hearts at the moment, including, again, Spittle playing a sort of deeper role. And I've always felt that Spittle has been kind of hamstrung in Scotland by the fact that he is a flexible player and he can play a lot of positions across the midfield and in attack. The difference is that when he was given the role that he was given at Motherwell last year, he was very, very effective. That is his best position. That's how you get the most out of him. And playing balls through to Shankland for him seems like an obvious thing to do. If he can do that with Theo Bair, he can do it with Lon Shankland. So ultimately you are playing players in the wrong position and you're not getting the best of them because of it.
And I think the only disappointment for us all is that the next Edinburgh derby is not until the 26th of October, because I think in their current guises, if Hearts and Hibs were to come up against each other, it would be an all-time stinker.
There's been much worse Hibs teams and much worse Hearts teams playing. I see your point. Yeah.
But there's so many Mingin vibes on both sides of the capital. And let's go to the other side of the capital, where Hibernian Football Club hosted Dundee, where they were hoping to secure their first Premiership win of the season. Didn't get off to a great start, I'll be honest, Graeme, because Scott Tiffany scored to take Dundee into a 1-0 lead. A goal for Lyle Cameron was ruled out, preventing Dundee from going 2-0 up. At that point, Hibs picked up the...
Tell me, Gary, because obviously you were there on Saturday at the game as well, and I was restricted to sort of viewing the highlights and catching up what Hibs fans have been saying about the game as well. Did it feel like if Dundee had gone 2-0 at that point, Hibs were going to be truly sort of rocked by that?
Oh, Graeme, I mean, I cannot get across to you how lusty the boos were midway through the first half when Bursic was just holding on to the ball. That's all he was doing, and he was just looking for someone to give the ball to, and the fans were going mad. And this was at about the 27-minute mark, and I genuinely think that, and to me, it was a very tight call, but at the end of the day, I think over the piece, a draw was maybe just about the fairest result, but I think things were on the precipice a little bit for Hibs, who did equalise just before half-time with a Martin Boyle free kick before taking the lead thanks to a Kieran Bowie goal midway through the second half, before inevitably Simon Murray popped up at the home of his former employers to stick the equaliser past Bursic. And Graeme, I'm not sure where to begin, but I feel like I have to begin with that Hibs defence because it's awful. It's so bad. I cannot get across to you how rotten it is. This is not the most in-depth analysis, but none of them would give me any sort of confidence whatsoever if they were lining up for Dundee, and I would not take a single one of them at Dundee Football Club. And I genuinely was stunned at just how poor they were. You could see just everything radiated from the lack of confidence that anybody has in Bursic. His distribution was terrible. We did not put him under enough pressure at all. Both goals were, to my mind, preventable in so many different ways, but particularly by him. Tiffany's shot was, it was strong, but it was pretty much right through him, and Murray slipped it through his legs at the end, and it just strikes me that Hibs have gone back to that sort of stereotypical era of a really, really poor keeper. But what then doesn't help that is that in front of him, O'Hora and Ekpiteta were terrible. Again, they just, particularly O'Hora, totally switched off for Dundee's equaliser. And I'm like looking back, obviously when you're at the game and it's your own team, you're not really concentrating that much on what the opposition are doing. But when I look back at the goal, it was, by this point, Dundee had switched about formation, and remind me to come back to that because I think there's warning lights flashing about David Gray's managerial competence as well. But Portales just managed to get his foot to the ball to knock it forward in Simon Murray's general direction. And O'Hora's just basically jogging towards it. Simon Murray nips in front of him. And then he had, and you don't really appreciate it from the angle that it's taken at, but from sitting behind the goal, Simon Murray had all the time in the world to adjust his feet, get himself ready, look up and pick his spot through the keeper's legs. But that is nothing compared to the defending for the first goal. It was a sclaffed clearance from Abita. There's a still that I sent you.
Yeah, the stills and the screenshots of the Hibernian backline at that point. I appreciate there's a degree of sort of Stramash in the goal in the first place, but the Hibernian backline and midfielders in front of it as well are 6s and 7s, doesn't even cover it. It's just all over the place.
It's all at sea. Lyle Cameron had all the time in the world to pick out Scott Tiffany, who was not being marked. There were 3 Hibs defenders just standing, doing absolutely nothing. But Scott Tiffany had lots of space just at the side of the 6-yard box to pick his spot, essentially. But I think that, for me, the difference between the two sides was really in the middle of the park. And I think a lot of people were maybe expecting, what will happen with Luke McCowan. It'd been tagged the Luke McCowan derby because of the ongoing saga there. But for me, it was all about Mo Silla, who had one of his best performances in dark blue, and he did something that I imagine Hibs are probably hoping Kwon will do, and to an extent he did do it. He did, not quite mark McCowan out of the game, but McCowan was kept quiet until Kwon was taken off for some reason by David Gray. And yeah, Silla just, was for a significant stretch of the game the only Dundee player getting to the second ball, who was happy to take the ball and just run with it and, drawing fouls. Colin Stephen totally lost control of the game about halfway through the second half. I think there were 7 or 8 yellow cards by the end, and it was not a 7 or 8 yellow card game. There wasn't a lot of needle in it. It was just one of those where every time he stopped the game, it felt like he was reaching for his pocket. But Silla was totally imperious, and I think that anybody watching that game and being told there's someone in the Dundee midfield that everybody's after would think it was Silla. And he's one of a number of players whose contracts run out at the end of the season that I'm pretty desperate to see us actually nail down a little bit. But I said that I wanted to pick up on David Gray's management, and something that wouldn't have been captured by the cameras was when Hibs were 2-1 up. At that point, Dundee made a change to go from, we'd started the game as a 4-3-3, so flat back 4, the usual midfield 3, and Tiffany and Palmer Holden, either side of Murray. Palmer Holden didn't have a terrific game. I think he was probably still carrying a bit of a knock from the Hearts game. Sorry, not the Hearts game, the Airdrie game the week before, but nevertheless, we moved to a 3-5-2, and as Curtis Main came on, he handed Luke McCowan, who's the captain for the day, a piece of paper with whatever instructions it was on it, along with the
score goals.
Shape. Yes, please score goals. These guys are Humpty. But anyway, Luke McCowan read it, right, okay, scrunched it up, threw it to the side of the pitch. Martin Boyle ran over, picked it up, read it, sort of running backwards, reading it, and doing all this, like doing the finger sign to Dundee players, and then getting the message back to the bench. Whatever message he passed back to the bench was the basis of David Gray making changes, which then totally handed the momentum back to Dundee and allowed us to totally take control of the game for the last 10-15 minutes. And even though Hibs had that chance, I think it was a Josh Campbell shot that came off the bar right at the end. I know it's sort of like, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? But other than that chance, once Dundee went ahead in the 88th minute and with 4 minutes of injury time, it was just wave after wave of Dundee attack. And I think there's a lot that still needs to happen at Hibs for them to have any confidence this season. And, I think Craig Anson's theory of only at most 2 out of the 3 of Hearts, Hibs and Aberdeen can have a good season. At the moment, I don't think Hibs are going to be one of those 2 because there just doesn't seem to be any part of their team that's working. Joe Newell's becoming increasingly one-footed. I wasn't entirely convinced by him. We've already covered the back line up top. I mean, Boyle stretches games.
Yeah. How is Bowie looking as a signing for Bernard? He's obviously he made these. He looked. Him immediately coming on and throwing Cameron Cutler-Vickers around like an empty track, he seemed like a positive thing, and then continued that in this game a little bit.
Yeah, he certainly added something, but the thing I keep coming back to is that Hibs only had 2 shots on target the whole game, and I think once he gets up to speed, undoubtedly he's not going to be coming off the bench. He's obviously going to be a starter because he's been signed for $700,000 or whatever it might be. But I think that until Hibs work out what on earth is going on, because they're just so disjointed, and at the moment the plan does still seem to basically be give the ball to Martin Boyle and see what happens, which is fine, and it did work. And there were quite a few hairy moments for Dundee, and I think particularly with quite a youthful back line. I mean, Billy Cometio's only 20, and unfortunately he gave away the free kick that Boyle scored from was the second.
He gave that free kick away.
Yes, he did. But that was the second one that we'd given away in pretty much that exact spot within a couple of minutes. So Martin Boyle had worked out what he was going to do second time around, which was bend it around that side of the wall. But yeah, as much as Bowie will undoubtedly be a big player for Hibs, he was to some extent gifted the goal because Cometio by that point was on the yellow card, so he clearly just didn't want to dive in and concede a penalty. Luke McCowan just didn't really seem to know what he was happened to be doing in his own box either. But nevertheless, Simon Murray popped up at the end, and it sparked a mini pitch invasion.
Just on that, right? I've had this sort of theory for a while. I reckon Dundee fans have the least regard for their own safety of any fan base in Scotland. And again, I would recommend you have a look at that. Go back and look at the Murray goal, because the distance that some people cover between their seat and then that sort of like the ground level bit that you can run about on at Easter Road, some of the distances that people cover is incredible, like truly incredible. Like the athleticism involved from, I'll say, gentlemen that don't necessarily look that athletic is astonishing. So yeah, I reckon Dundee fans have the least regard for their own safety of any fan base in the country.
Well, we've not had a lot to live for like 30, 40 years, Graeme, so we might as well do what we will. And actually, on that note, the Hibs did have to open up an extra part of the ground, not because more Dundee fans turned up, but because fans were just standing in the stairway for no other reason than we can't be bothered going to the seats in there, so we're just going to stand in the stairway, and what are you going to do about it? But no, it was a genuinely terrific moment, because that was Simon Murray's first league goal this season. He's obviously already scored 4 or 5 in the cup, but that's opened his account. It maybe gets a little bit of a monkey off his back as well. I still think there's still a couple of things that Dundee will have to do in the window, because we didn't have a lot of options to bring off the bench. We had Curtis Main essentially as the only game changer to bring off the bench, and it does mean that we can sort of change the system up a little bit. But if, for argument's sake, Mo Silla picked up an injury, it's going to be Jordan McGee or Finlay Robertson that moves in there. If it's Jordan McGee, that changes our back line. We don't really have backup at full back that I can think of. Up top, it's, as I say, obviously we've got Murray, we've got Main, we've got Palmer Holden, we've got Tiffany. But there's not a lot of depth there. And I think that we're probably going to see a couple of loanees come in. We're probably going to see maybe
some Burnley lads.
Yeah, it'll be Burnley lads. Apparently it's not going to be Ronaldinho's son, which is devastating, because that would be a peak Dundee signing. Someone totally hopeless being signed because his dad was famous. But no, it won't be him. But a couple of Burnley loanees. Scott Fraser continues to be rumoured. Ryan Jack continues to be linked to us, as he is linked to approximately 50% of the Scottish Premiership at the moment. So
he's linked to anyone that has a grass pitch.
Yeah, essentially. A grass pitch, and maybe not the wisest grasp of economics as well. But anyway, it was a 2-2 draw in the end. It means that Dundee's unbeaten run continues, and it means that Hibs' winless run continues as well. Oh dear.
You said the same thing there, but in different ways. It's very good, very clever.
Yeah, I do what I can. What was not so clever, though, was Adama Sidibeh at the weekend. Dundee United took part in what apparently is a Tayside derby. I don't believe such a thing exists. It's one of the few things I agree with my brethren in Tangerine on. But nevertheless, Dundee United ran out 2-0 victories over St Johnstone. St Johnstone conspiring to chuck away an absolute golden opportunity in the first half before on loan Liverpool defender Lucas Stevenson popped up to score for United, and then just a bit of an unfortunate own goal courtesy of a bit of a mind blank from Josh Ray, putting the gloss on the victory for the hosts. I picked this game out, Graeme, as a potential sliding doors moment for both sides in a Patreon with Tony last week, and this result feels a little bit like that, because Adama Sidibeh did not take his red card very well, did he?
No, and kind of the wider context of the game as well. I mean, St Johnstone have been okay this season so far. They have reasons to be mildly positive for the first time in quite a long time. Like the team is sensible. Some of the players that they've brought in actually look decent. Some of the players that they had previously have improved. It felt like they're getting closer to being what you would anticipate a St Johnstone side being, which is ultimately probably hard-working and better than the sum of your parts. Not meaning it in a dismissive way at all, but that's broadly what almost all teams in Scotland are aspiring to be, which is better than the sum of their parts, because you've crafted together a squad of wave strays and ne'er-do-wells in order to try and create something out of them. Fair enough. St Johnstone in the game were quite good in the first half, created plenty of good openings, didn't manage to get the ball over the line, even with Andre Raymond, who should have scored. Like, again, that's if you're talking sliding doors moments, that's as big a sliding doors moment in a game as you're going to get. In a first half where St Johnstone have already been good, a huge opportunity, a huge chance to go and take the lead. and going at half-time up. And then the opening goal from United is the sort of thing that happens. I wouldn't necessarily say against the run of play, but in a tight game, it's the sort of goal that you end up with, which it drops to someone after someone's made a save, whatever else as well. Again, I've serious concerns about St Johnstone's goalkeepers, and I just don't think any of them are good enough ultimately at this level. And you were sort of talking about your man Bursick at Hibs, and it kind of feels almost every season somebody ends up for an extended spell with a goalkeeper who is simply not good enough. Obviously, you look at examples like Dundee United. Mark Birighitti is a guy who just, like, Dundee United went down because they had Mark Birighitti. Is the long and the short of it. They weren't a good team, but they were a very bad team because of that. Kilmarnock would have stayed up if they'd had somebody other than Colin Doyle in goals. Somebody like Joe Pereira at Hearts was an absolute disaster for them for a significant cost. And it just leaves you in a hole of... Motherwell was similar last season as well with Liam Kelly as well. Again, Liam Kelly was a good goalkeeper for Motherwell across the piece. Last year he had a very bad season. And it feels there's always a team that has someone that's like an outlier in terms of how bad their goalkeeper is. I had penciled in Bursick as potentially that for Hibs. I think the answer is right at St Johnstone. If they don't bring someone else in, and I do wonder whether the second goal they conceded in this game kind of may be the final red flag to be raised, and that we can't continue with this. We can't continue in a situation where somebody's going to be costing as a goal a game, and
I think it's going to be a huge challenge of Levine's man management as well, because I think a mutual friend of ours was pointing out, at what point do you take Josh Ray out of the firing line?
Yeah.
Because if you take him out now, it will destroy his confidence, and you may well need to bring him back in
at some point, yeah,
as well. And it's an absolutely impossible situation. But it's not been helped further up top by Sidibeh's actions either, because that will now be it's not quite clear. Is it 4 or 5 games?
I think Craig Anderson had highlighted in the Terrace Discord. I think he suggested it would be 3 or 4 games, which with the run of games it's just a half as well. Like it's games that you're potentially looking at being like, these are quite important games. Like, just don't do anything stupid. Ultimately, is the order of the day at this moment in time, because we've seen in the past teams that can rack up points early on in the season, but again, facing Motherwell, facing Aberdeen, facing Ross County, and then Celtic doesn't really matter. But again, 3 ties that you'd have penciled in as opportunities. It was something that tickled me on the sports scene coverage was Michael Stewart highlighting that, like, I don't think it's a second booking. I'm like, well, the referee makes it very, very clear when he does the gesture on one. He's like, this is for the multiple fouls. This is not for this foul. This is the final foul of various other fouls you've had. And again, if there have been multiple fouls before that, get him hooked, like, before he does something silly. And it's straight from the off. If your centre forward is trying to do Maradona things in front of the goalkeeper, in the age of VAR, then maybe he's not quite on it today. Maybe today's not quite your moment. But there's something about Tannadice as well, isn't there? Like, I feel like there's been a disproportionate number of meltdowns at Tannadice from players, whether it's like Watto Kwate or Willow Flood, Gavin Gunning. Like guys that just, there's something. And as well as that, because they always have of course they have the dressing room in the corner, it always feels like an exceedingly long walk for anyone to have to get from any point in the stadium to the changing rooms as well. So yeah, just a moment of daftness, which yeah.
But we should, as much as I don't really want to, give some credit as well to Dundee United, who have come up as the champions from last season. They've done what I didn't actually expect them to do, which was to actually pretty much totally retool the team. They've not just come up and tried to evolve. They have absolutely ripped up the team lines and shipped a lot of guys out, shipped a lot of guys in. And so far, I would obviously argue that they've been very spawny and lucky, Graham, but I recognise that is my horrible, bitter Dundee bias coming through. And they've negotiated a couple of fixtures, and they're sitting on 5 points after 3 games, and they are, as ever, with Twitter, you don't want to be the main character on that day, and it doesn't feel like Dundee United are going to be the main character on a Premiership day, which is probably just where they want to be.
Someone highlighted, I think it was the season they went down, I think it was October before they racked up 5 points, which is startling in itself. And again, you're quite right in terms of like ultimately fair play. Like looking at the United squad that did come up, my overall feeling was that if they continue with these players, then they will struggle, because the team that they had and the team that won the Championship last year was not good enough to compete in the Premiership level. We've seen a bit out of Babunski and Trapanovsky to highlight they're decent. Ferry looks like a very good player. Ferry looks like a very good player. Stevenson, I think that was Stevenson's first senior or first professional goal. Again, fine. It looks like a sensible player. Backline, again, Gallagher, I remain unconvinced about, and Graham seems to be in good form, and seems to have sort of starting to fulfil that kind of early promise within that as well. And it's like Holt and Sibbald, I would argue that's a fairly limited central midfield pairing, but also you know exactly what you're going to get from week in, week out with that, so that's fine.
Yeah, and Kevin Holt is probably one of a couple of players that are already making the case for their Mr. Versatile nominees. I think probably him, Paul McGinn, and Jordan McGee have probably already each played 3 positions in 3 Premiership games, so good for them. So well done, United. I hope you're happy with yourself. Another team that will be happy is Aberdeen Football Club, who ran out 2-0 victors over, I was going to say Europe addled, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I'm going to use it, Europe addled Kilmarnock, who have continued a rather stinking start to the Premiership season and sit rock bottom of the SPFL Premiership. And it's yet another game, Graham, where Kilmarnock have gone down to 10 men. I do wish I had Craig Anson on, not to mock him and poke him.
Or just to call him hammer throwing thugs, yeah.
Yeah, but also to actually question, I wasn't quite sure, and ultimately it worked out okay for Aberdeen, but it felt a bit odd to me that the ref called a halt to what seemed to be a 3-on-2 for Aberdeen, only to brandish a yellow. And, obviously the VAR review led to it being a red card, but that was slightly odd, but yeah, that's
kind of in 2 parts as well on that as well, and I agree with you that from the first part. That secondly, I'm not convinced. Like again, if you're talking about the threshold for VAR to get involved, I actually found it really satisfying watching a game at Firth Park on Sunday where there was no involvement basically, and that's a positive. I think that's good if you're going to change what the threshold is. If you're going to change things like that, great, brilliant. I'm not convinced that Lions tackle reaches or breaches the threshold for VAR to get involved in the first place. Like you say, I'm surprised that they stopped the play to book him when they were on attack. I'm secondly surprised that VAR got involved in the first place. I think this is the sort of very much in the orange card territory, rather than a red. Like you can see Lyons does his very best to, like he is unmistakably flown into the tackle. I think he himself has basically acknowledged while he's doing it that he's done the wrong thing, because you can see him getting his studs out of the way so he doesn't make contact. He absolutely clatters the Aberdeen player, yes. I'm not convinced that. To me, you looked at it back and I'm like, well, yes, that's whatever the referee had given, I wouldn't have argued it. Ultimately, I think if he'd booked him, okay, that's probably a bit lenient. If he sends him off, that's probably a bit harsh. So for VAR to get involved, it felt like a weird one for them to get involved in. Was my long and the short answer to that. And
I mean, ultimately as well, it just doesn't help. I was going to say poor old Kilmarnock. I don't feel sorry for them, but obviously they've got IFC Copenhagen visiting in midweek. It would take a Herculean effort for Killie to overcome them, but obviously they're going to have to give their all to that. But I'm sure they'll be fine. But it's just you look at the fixtures they've had this season, and there's got to be some sort of level of disappointment for them that they are where they are in the league. But I think any Kilmarnock fan complaining about that is perhaps slightly mad, because how many times are you going to have a chance? 90 minutes away from 90 minutes and a bit of a shock result away from playing European League football. But
here's a question for you, Gary: are Aberdeen good?
I don't know. I don't think anyone knows at the moment. I mean, it's 8 games on the trot, or 8 victories on the trot, I should say.
Yes.
And it's very difficult to tell. I mean, when even Pappy Guy is looking good, and obviously he should mention he scored the double, 2 headers to secure Aberdeen the victory. But it feels to me as if, and I hate this phrase, but I'm going to use it anyway, it feels like the adults are back in the room at Aberdeen Football Club because it feels as if, they've got a man, Jimmy Thielen clearly has a bit of a plan, a blueprint that he wants to follow. They've lost Miovski, but they don't look the poorer for it, and obviously they are quite literally not the poorer for it because they've absolutely raked it in there. They've not come up against anyone.
Well, see, this is kind of my thing, right? Like, don't get me wrong, right? Rubizic, for a start, looks like a better centre half this year.
McGrath's really...
McGrath's been terrific. I was curious as how sort of Nielsen and Shinnie would work as a midfield pair, because I don't know whether it's just a press thing, but it was kind of felt a bit like, I'm bringing in Nielsen, he's going to be my guy, but Shinnie's obviously, the pair of them have been absolutely terrific as well. It gives you such a good midfield pairing, and you see it over and over again of Nielsen just popping a wee 2-yard pass off and then immediately getting it back, which then opens up the play for somebody else to go and play into. It's really, really, they're very good. They're very good. They've been very good in their games. However, right, and I'm always worried that every time I talk about Aberdeen fans get really upset that I'm being super negative about them there as well. And like I do think the Miovski point is very relevant. Obviously, it's great for the club. They've got the money in. Keskinen looks like a find in that respect as well. Nisbet, if he gets up to speed and stays fit, I think that answers the questions I have about Aberdeen. My concern is that Kevin Nisbet has not a great injury record. I would say it feels like he misses quite a lot of football. I don't think Sockler is good. I don't think Sockler is good enough for Aberdeen in the shot. Gay, kind of hard to tell. He was barely involved last year. His touch looks wayward at points in games, but again, who cares because he scores 2 goals? Like, ultimately, he's a very game player. But what my concern is for Aberdeen in the meantime is that it always feels like they're just one piece away. And like last season, it felt like the one piece away was they didn't have a sensible, competent manager in order to put them together in a way which works. And unless Nisbet is there and hits the ground running, then I feel that the one piece away that they are this year is as a centre forward. Now, that might not matter because Jimmy McGrath is a very fine player, and maybe between Keskinen, Gay, and McGrath, and presumably at least 3 bullet headers from Rubizic over the course of the season as well. Perhaps with all of them, it doesn't really matter. But the only thing, like Aberdeen, every time I've seen them, they've been really impressive. They've looked very practical and sensible and just good football team doing good football team things. Besoygen being back involved as well, I think is a good thing for them as well. It was weird how he just sort of disappeared. I don't know what happened there, but he's always looked like a fine player when he's on his day. But yeah, when you remove that piece of Miovski, he's like that Pep Guardiola quote, we can't replace him. We can't because he is a better quality player than you're able to do. So maybe you replace him across the rest of the team. But as I say, my only concern for Aberdeen moving over the course of the rest of the season is that just the one piece that they miss now, is just having that actually good recognised number 9. If it's Nisbet, fair play, good. That's good business. You've done well there. It won't be Sockler. Like I'm just no. He will not do. If he's going to be your guy, it's going to have to play that many minutes.
And I think the other thing that really works in Aberdeen's favour is that if you look at even the couple of fixtures that they've got coming up, I think they've got County next, and then after that I think it's Motherwell, Motherwell, then Dundee, and so on. They must be the last team to play either Celtic or Rangers, because I think that's their two of the last 3 in like the first round of weeks, and so you can absolutely see that by the point they're coming up against Celtic and Rangers, I mean, they're already 8 points clear.
8 clear of Hearts, I think.
Yeah, at this point, they could well be 12, 13 clear of Hearts by the time. Which especially
again, if they're just sensible, if they take the adults in the room approach that you're saying, if you're 12 points clear, then you will take 3rd place.
Yeah, because ultimately, Kilmarnock will get better. But
Yeah.
and they're probably not going to qualify for the Conference League, which means that in turn they will not have the Thursday Sunday rotation that Hearts are afraid of. But they don't look quite as, on early evidence, they don't look quite as strong as they did last season. St Mirren, who we will come to, probably don't either. And then when you go through the rest of the league, there's not anyone else that has the squad depth and the consistency to really challenge. So at the moment, it really feels like unless disaster befalls them, unless, I don't know, Jimmy Thielen gets hit by a massive snowball or something, then they'll be fine. I
actually, in a number of ways, I really hope Kelly qualify for the group stage. In large part, right, because I would love to see the mad trolley dash that Derek McInnes is going to have to do. Like, if say on Thursday night, Kelly go and win 3-0, they're 2 up by half time. Are Kelly signing players at half time? Like, at that point, at that stage, are they just going, listen, there's a fucking chance here we're going to have to play Sunday, Thursday, 6 more times this season. Like, their squad is so thin.
You know what they'll end up
so thin.
You know what they're going to end up doing? They're going to end up looking at, because Bordeaux folded. It's going to be like the, I forget his name, the Lee Clark era, where 12 or 13 names just written on folded pieces of paper. And it's just going to be, all right, lads, I would like to introduce you to half of last season's Bordeaux side who have now joined us.
The idea of basically hitting full time, and there's a set of Rugby Park rocking, roofs blowing off the place because people are so jazzed about it. And then Derek McInnes, literally 25 seconds later, is just literally sprinting up the stairs to bang on the chairman's door. But we need some fucking players, now, immediately. Can we? And again, I don't know. I know Scottish football clubs, and I suspect they don't have a list of players that they would do if that's what happens, because why would you? There's no preparation, there's no worrying, there's no concern over things like that. They need 6 bodies, probably minimum, if they were to go and beat Copenhagen. So I would love to see it. I would love to see the absolute sprint finish of the transfer window for them. So yeah.
Well, sticking with teams who might have a busy end to the transfer window, Celtic beat St Mirren 3-0. Graeme, it's only week 3, but I am not entirely enthused about having to discuss Celtic Football Club because, again, they just ran out a very professional and comprehensive victory. A long range banger from Callum McGregor.
I feel like I've watched this. I feel like I've watched this game 25 times. Just it's a sort of overcast, miserable Paisley. Callum McGregor last year's one in from distance. Okay.
And then Hatate scores a lovely goal off the post, and Alistair Johnstone caps it all off. Obviously, since this game, Celtic have lost Matt O'Reilly, who signed for Brighton. So the question is probably, how are Celtic going to spend the megabucks? Are they actually going to spend the megabucks or not? No, they're probably not. They will
not. Celtic won't spend the money, but they'll. So you would assume sign some other bodies coming in on that front there as well. But again, even if they didn't, Celtic are miles ahead. Miles and miles and miles ahead. As much as we will come on to briefly speak about Rangers who thumped Ross County 6-0, Celtic are miles ahead. Even if they were to lose, again, one of Hatate or Kyogo, I think if they lost Hatate, that's a slight concern. Just because it simply leaves them light on sort of quality bodies in central midfield. But we're at this stage of the season, like you say, you just have no worries. It's almost a case of this is quite repetitive already. They had Kuhn on the bench and Palma didn't even come on. Kuhn came on and contributed. He looks like a much better and more prepared player this season. It seems like he's bedded in now. Palma didn't get off the bench, and again, I quite like Palma. I think he's a very good player for this level. This is just, unless they're to befall a series of injuries, Schmeichel looks entirely competent in some ways, potentially a degree of an upgrade in terms of how he moves the ball with his feet, which is a positive as well. They're tracking a left back to try and replace or upgrade on Greg Taylor in a way which I don't think you really need to even. Like, again, they're just miles better than anybody else.
And ultimately, the only scenario in which Celtic are going to spend big is if they think, let's make a concerted effort to really do something in Europe that's really sort of break open the biscuit tin, which they're not going to do, which is why rumours of Celtic bringing back Odsonne Edouard, you're not going to replicate his wages, even though it's Crystal Palace. You're not going to do that. You could, potentially, but you're not going to. So they're not going to gold plate things. But yeah, as you say, they look miles better. St Mirren, I think, just to touch on them very briefly, it's the same question that you posed about Aberdeen, but in reverse, which is, are St Mirren going to be all right? I don't mean are they going to be safe. I just mean, are they going to be a decent side this season?
I think they will be. Like, again, Robinson was very clear at the end of the game. He's like, we just didn't turn up today. And having watched a lot of Stephen Robinson teams, every so often, right, he just gets a performance where it just doesn't work. St Mirren fans will have seen it. We certainly saw it as well. They're a very good team when they are at 95% and above. Anything less than that, and they're just not particularly good to watch or particularly competitive in games, and it becomes more acute when you play good teams like Celtic. On their day, St Mirren can take points off Celtic. They are one of the few sides in the league, I would actually argue, on their day can take points off Celtic, because I do think Celtic are just miles ahead of everybody else. But the way in which St Mirren contest games in a way that the only way you can beat Celtic is either to contest them and scrap with them at a level, or to outplay them. And very few teams can outplay them with quality. Some can out-scrap them and outfight them. I think St Mirren are certainly in the latter column there. They are a good team. They had a bad day, and every so often with Stephen Robinson teams, they just have shit days. You need everybody else. You need everybody. They cannot carry any passengers in a team. And occasionally, even when they do that, they just come up against a better football team.
And to round us off, speaking of coming up against better football teams, Rangers scudded Ross County 6-0 at Hampden. I'm not even going to rattle through all the scores for this, Graeme, but Cyril Dessers picked up a couple. Tom Lawrence scored as well. Danilo scored his first goal in 9 months, I believe. So it was a pretty good day for Rangers, who never really looked in any danger of any sort of slip-up. I am just delighted that they happened to click into gear against a team playing in dark blue right now and not in a couple of weeks' time. But for Ross County, again, you can't judge a Ross County season based on how they play against either side of the Old Firm away. But following on from deservedly losing Spartans in the League Cup, it's not looking particularly positive for Don Cowie's men.
Yes and no. Yes and no. And that getting an absolute hiding off of Rangers at Hampden is not ideal. Losing to Spartans is not ideal. I don't think they're a particularly good team. Hale looks like he's got a little bit of something about him. And Ross County had chances in this game. They had opportunities, particularly on the break, and simply didn't take them. Like, they had chances, they had opportunities, but just looked a bit lax in it. And again, I've seen Hale a couple of times now, and I've been sort of suitably impressed with him. I think he will offer something to them as a team. I think they are lacking in quality from a big part of that. But again, I don't know. There's something about I trust the Ross County teams managed by ex-Ross County players. I don't trust any other Ross County team.
Yeah,
never even like the Malky Mackay Ross County team that was quite good. That felt like more of an anomaly than anything else. It just feels like if you have a Highland manager that understands what we're trying to do here, then that's absolutely fine. I don't know, man. Like, Rangers, it was a difficult Rangers team to come up against. Like, it kind of felt like Rangers were at the point where they were. It almost feels like a degree of just boredom around Rangers at the moment, from the fan base to a degree. Like, they just feel a bit sort of jaded by the whole thing. Like, playing at Hampden is not where anybody wants to be. Losing the Champions League was the downer that nobody really needed. Like, starting off the season with a draw, like, it just feels like they're kind of just going through the motions at the meantime, and until either they can ship out players and bring in better ones, or get back to Ibrox, depending on whichever one comes first. But like, it can't be inspiring playing in front against like a half-empty Hampden every Saturday or Sunday. Like, I was received a message from a close associate who said like they'd nipped to the shop at half time and there was Rangers fans leaving. I was like, it does look like a crap experience. Yeah. Particularly when you're so used to turning up at Ibrox every single week, and it's the same thing, good, bad, and indifferent of whether the team is good. You get the same, roughly the same experience of being there. Going to Hampden to see not your stadium, not really a team that you love particularly well, just a bit jaded by the whole thing, and I do kind of understand that as well.
Yeah, and I think the real difficulty is that obviously the Rangers will play Celtic this weekend, and in some ways this is a good preparation, but in others I imagine that for Rangers fans they might be holding their breath somewhat, because obviously a derby always has some sort of levelling effect on things, but although things did seem to click into gear, at least in terms of goals getting scored at the weekend, as we've already said, Celtic seem so far ahead, and they seem pretty settled in terms of who's going to play, what shape they're going to play. The relationship, for the most part, between fans and the team, at least, is fine. Obviously, Celtic fans will always be on at the board to spend a bit more money, but yeah, I imagine that listlessness that Rangers fans feel might only increase if Celtic end up just basically putting their hand on Rangers' foreheads as they swing wildly and go down 2 or 3-0 at the weekend. But stranger things have happened, Graeme. Good. Well, that's the end of this week's roundup of the Premiership fixtures. As ever, do keep an eye on our Patreon feed. No doubt, with this being the final week of the transfer window, there will be lots of content going up as the week continues. No doubt, teams will panic. Teams will buy people they shouldn't. Teams will sell people they really shouldn't. I'm looking at you, Dundee. So do keep an eye and ear out on that. There will be plenty going up over the course of the week. And we will be back in the main feed on Thursday with yet another Lower League podcast delivered by CGT and Sean. So until then, thank you very much, Graeme.
Thank you very much, Gary.
And enjoy your football when it comes, unless you're Hearts, because you don't win. Bye.
Hey!